Greetings, programs, and welcome to the Awesome Friday podcast. My name is Matthew, and with me is Simon, and we're going to talk about two movies, as we generally do. But first, how are you today, Simon?
Hello, everyone. I'm okay. I have eaten far too much food in the last 24 hours because somebody pointing at you made delicious bread and added it to a table with raclette, cheese, and meat and vegetables and all kinds of stuff. And I think I had 4 platefuls of bread and meat and cheese,
I
followed
mean,
by
that's ridiculous. I'm not sure there's any such thing as too much bread, meat, and
no.
cheese.
I guess not, but I've never been good at portion control if I'm eating something delicious. And boy, howdy, was it delicious. And then we had brownies, and then we had your muffins, and I ate too many of my brownies. And then another dessert got pulled out, a surprise dessert, so I had that as well. And so I feel like I don't need to eat again. But I do love eating, and I love eating when the food is so good.
I mean, we live in capitalist, consumerist society, so there is no such thing as too much when it comes to these things.
Yeah, it was pretty great. Oh, sorry, how are you doing?
I'm good. My sleep schedule is generally kind of screwed at the moment, so I had this whole grand plan of being productive this morning that fell apart when I slept in by 2 3/4 hours. So I need to fix that. It's become a real thing. The downside of being your own boss is that if you're not great with time management, it can quickly become kind of a runaway train. And I'm not saying that's where I'm at, but also my sleep schedule is messed up.
Right.
So, yeah.
Are you going to bed too late and waking up late?
Yeah.
You just shifted?
Yeah, it just keeps shifting later, and like at some point, I'm just going to become nocturnal. It's fine.
I always thought I could do nocturnal. Before I had kids, I was very much the kind of person that would start writing music or something at 11 p.m. and go to like 2-3 in the morning, and that's when all my good stuff was. And now I've had kids, that isn't an option anymore. Like if I'm awake past 10:30, it's a miracle.
I mean, it's also just been a busy week for work, but not only day job work, but I'm sure, as you're aware, because you're in this with me, but I co-founded a Critics Society this week. So if you are listening to this and you are, involved in movie making, you should go and check out CascadiaCritics.com, because we are a newly formed Critics Society with thoughts and opinions and awards and a dozen inaugural members, and that has been a strangely larger amount of work than I thought it would be, given how little time I have from my day job. So, but we are in the midst of announcing all the nominations for our inaugural Best Cascadian Film Award, and once that's out, we'll also have our top 10 of the year soon after. So lots of exciting things happening in the movie writing world as well. Yeah, don't sound too excited, Simon. You're gonna really.
No, I was reading something about the Cascadian films. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask, and it's made me think a lot about the region in which you're like focusing on. Is not usually something I would chase to see. Like, again, this goes back to what we've talked about a couple of times now, is that we both, you're much better at this than I am, but we both want to actively see stuff outside of just the major releases, because there's so much stuff in there, especially Canadian stuff, that I would not have seen that has really been outstanding the last couple of years. So it's a really interesting project. I'm really glad to be part of it, and I'm especially glad that I am not any part of the organizational side of it. So good job, and keep up the fine work.
Yeah, so you can check that out. Anyone who's listening, check it out. It's CascadiaCritics.com. We're also on all of the socials, and it is just getting started. Like, the website is up, but it's technically not complete. But we have 12 members. It's lots of exciting plans. and we are going to do just our top 10 films of the year this year, but we do have plans for a full slate of critic awards for next year. Focusing on the Cascadia, filmmaking in the Cascadia region. So that means basically the shorthand for that at the moment is BC and Washington. And whenever we expand the membership, we might expand that scope a little bit, but centering on the Pacific Northwest of North America. So
it's a good focus to have. It's nice. It's not just Canadian. It's not just American. It's not just indie. It feels like it's something that is distinct from all the other sort of regional groupings of these things. And it's interesting because so many films in that area share a visual uniformity because it is so beautiful outside here. But it looks the same. The coast from like Oregon up to the top before you get to Alaska pretty much looks the same, but just different versions of absolutely stunning. And it films so well because the light is so good. And so many of these films are just gorgeous, 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 which is really nice.
Yeah, and if you've ever watched, I mean, we're focusing on film predominantly, but our name is technically the Cascadia Film and Television Critics Association. And so we will probably we'll have TV awards as well. So if you're a TV watcher and you watch any network stuff, you've basically seen Vancouver as well, because we're such a big hub for, like, if you watched Supernatural or any Hallmark movie or Stargate or got like there's so many, obviously showing my like genre tastes, but there's so many things that are filmed here. Follow the House of Usher this year was filmed here. Lots of Netflix stuff films here. Like it's all
Midnight Mass as well.
Yeah, what I'm saying is you've seen Vancouver, you've seen the Pacific Northwest if you've watched TV or film. So because so much stuff is just made here. So yeah, we're trying to focus and highlight some of that, and hopefully some of the lesser known stuff. I'm really proud of our Best Cascadian Film nominees because there's stuff that I think a lot of it is. I think all of them are things you probably haven't seen, with maybe one exception. And I'm really happy that we're able to highlight stuff that is otherwise great.
Did you ever watch Continuum with Rachel Nichols? That was the nice thing about that. It's a sci-fi time travel-y future-y show, but it's actually not just filmed in Vancouver, but actually set in Vancouver as well. And it's nice because most things are filmed here pretend it's San Francisco or somewhere, or generic American town, but this was openly like Vancouver. Yeah, and that's always nice.
Yeah, that was a fun show too. I never finished it, but I did watch the first like two.
Yeah, it was.
I think it went for 4 years, and I think I watched two of them.
It was very good.
It's on my list to rewatch at some point, but I'm two seasons deep in my rewatch of Cheers right now, and that's taking up all my time.
Do you just want to go somewhere where everybody knows your name? Is that what you're yearning for?
You know what's amazing about that show actually is that I hadn't watched it since I was young, because obviously it ended in 93 or whatever, and I don't think I had watched an episode since then. Like I remember very distinctly, I remember watching the finale when it happened. But I definitely watched so much of that show when I was young that the first time as soon as the theme song came on, like I remembered all the words, like all of them. And it's just so like familiar and comforting. I've been really, really, really enjoying it, and so much of it is just like dad jokes that make me laugh. Like there's a great example in the episode I just watched. So the initial setup of the show is that Diane Chambers comes in and she's dumped and she gets a job at the bar. And there's an episode in season 2 where the guy who dumped her comes back. And he's like, I'm the guy who dumped Diane. And I was at dinner with a friend last night. And this is where I left her. And he told me that she works here. Is that true? And Coach, the character is talking to, says, I don't know. I wasn't at the dinner. It's just like, yeah, it's like top tier level dad jokes, and they're so well delivered that I enjoy every second of it.
It was a good cast. How did they end that show then? Give me a synopsis. How did they like close the bar? How do you end a show like Cheers? Did everyone walk out one by one and the last person looks behind them and then closes the door and locks it?
So
Or did it burn down?
I haven't looked. I don't remember exactly the end, the last two. I think it's a 2-part end, and I don't remember all of it, and I haven't looked it up because I want to like appreciate it when I get to it. But the one thing I do very distinctly remember is the last shot of the show is Sam walking over to the bar is empty, and he walks over and he like straightens the painting that they put up after Coach died, because it was actually Nicholas Colasanto's painting in his dressing room, and they put it on the set to like honor him after he died. So he straightens the painting, and someone comes to the door and like knocks on it, and he looks over and he says, "Sorry, we're closed." And then it sort of fades to black. That was the last shot.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's a great show. Like it's, I have a good / bad feeling that when I'm done watching Cheers, I'm just going to move on to Frasier. But but I'm not at a point in Cheers where I've gotten to Frasier appearing yet. So because he doesn't show up until like season 3 or 4.
Yeah. I enjoyed watching Frasier very much when I was younger, and I'm not sure how I feel about like elitist New York humor.
Oh, but
Do you know what I mean?
but the brilliance of that show is that it is constantly making fun of Niles and Frasier. Like it's never like you're never laughing with them. You're always laughing at them. Like the heroes of that show are Daphne and the dad and Roz, who are always like, yeah, they're always laughing at them, not with them. It's a very unsubtle satire of these types of people. As it was in Cheers, like he's a regular. Who's a regular on that show from like season 3 to the end, and I'm pretty sure he was being satirized the entire time. My bigger problem with it, honestly, is that Kelsey Grammer is a garbage human now, and I don't really know that I want to.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, and I don't necessarily want to support him any more than I already do, but I'm pretty sure he's already been paid for Frasier, so.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just gonna guess he's like a massive Republican. That seems to be the shock revelation for.
He literally said he would support Trump, like last week.
Like, good, lovely.
Yeah. Makes me wonder why there's a revival of the show, and it makes me. I would love to be a fly on the wall with to hear whatever David Hyde Pierce said when he said he didn't want to be on the show.
Oh, he refused, did he?
Well, I don't know if he refused. That might be just me, just adding some assumption to the way I'm phrasing it. But he's not on the show, right? So, and I think and Jane. I don't think Jane Leaves was on the show, but Harry Gilpin was, and a few other people from the original run. So, but yeah, Niles is not in the reboot in the revival.
Interesting.
So anyway, it's very much like film.
Yes. What should we talk about?
So we should move on and talk about some films.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about 2 films today, which I know is a shock. And we're going to start off with one we're finally catching up with, which had its big debut back at the height of festival season and is finally available on demand. So we were finally able to catch up with it. So, Simon, why don't you give us the basic lowdown of the 3 hour and 40 minutes epic film that is Killers of the Flower Moon?
I was hoping you were going to give me the second one.
I know you were.
This is set. Oh god, I didn't even research the year it's set in.
It's in the 20s. Doesn't really matter. It's in the 20s. It's post World War I.
In the Osage County, where the Osage people are rich because they have oil, and it's at a time where that money was flowing freely in from the Americans as they moved west, and so it made the Osage people very, very rich. Something I didn't know about. I had no idea at all that. I only know white people absolutely running natives into the ground I had no idea that the native Osage people were so well established at that time. And that was a bit of an eye opener for me. And it sets as a this is a movie that wants to teach you things about that, and it sure does, because it's basically a film about white oppression and the colonizers, the settlers moving into this land and basically just taking, stealing, killing. And within all this, you have Leonardo DiCaprio's character, Ernest, who is returning from being injured in the war. And he's come back to live with his uncle and his brother to try and sort of fix his life and get back to some kind of normalcy after the horrific things he's seen in the war. And so the environment at that time is lots of white business people trying to exploit the very, very rich Osage people, and basically, without giving too much away, his uncle, William Hale, played by Robert De Niro, is a friend of the Osage people on the outside, but it soon becomes very, very apparent that he is not as squeaky clean as he would like to other people to think he is, and he is very much a pushing force in making Ernest weasel himself into a family, so he gets that Osage's family's money when when they die one by one, of which they do. And there's something else I didn't know about. If you didn't have a certain categorization, you had to have a guardian with you. Again, more ridiculous rules placed on the Osage people by the white colonizers. I would love to know how it got to that point, because there's a jump from the Osage people have lots of money and are very well dressed to now they have to have guardians for their money and permission for how to spend their money. And that I don't know the history of that, so I didn't know how it got from one to the other. But basically,
so, I don't want to interrupt your spiel too badly, but it's like that from the start in the film. Like, that's why there's an early film with Molly who she's going to ask her like financial guardian for money to pay for something. It's like one of the first scenes of the film, and the answer to it is that like the natives had money and the white people basically said that like declared a number of them like incompetent to handle their own money. It's terrible,
right? But so that's exactly what I'm talking about, because the opening montage paints the Osage as being rich, being successful, and what power did the white people have to then say you're incompetent, so you can't control your own money? I would like to know that transfer to the point where they're asking permission for money, because they clearly have it. And it's basically it's Scorsese with a sharp edge, trying to educate people on the terrible things that these white settlers did to the Osage people. And it's just a litany, a series of terrible, terrible things. And DiCaprio is our focus. It's interesting because he's not really sympathetic at all. He spends most of this movie being a coward who won't, even when he loves someone, he's still absolutely manipulated into doing terrible things. And it's just a series of terrible people doing terrible things with terrible outcomes for 3.5 hours. And I mean, centrally, you've got a very Scorsese style story of a young guy who wants to make a name for himself, who falls in love with someone but has his toes too deep in the crime family and is manipulated, and that relationship becomes soured, and then there are consequences to the law. And the latter sort of hour and a half is the consequences of that lifetime of bad decisions. And so this is a story that Scorsese has told before, but I don't know. I felt like I've seen this film before, but the cinematography is that the visuals are very, very pretty. And I think there's some very interesting performance work, particularly from Lily Gladstone, who's a standout here. And Scorsese does not hold back from making it very, very clear. He's not asking for a both sides argument here. It's a very clear education session on the true terrible things that these people did, and probably still do. It's not. This is not history. This is America. So I'm sure this happens daily in different ways. I don't know.
I mean, we know it. We know it does. You just have to watch the news to find out that it does.
Right. Right.
Although I don't
So
necessarily hold it against anyone who's not watching the news. That shit is depressing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. For me, I feel that this is kind of just fine. It doesn't have the bite in the script that many of Scorsese's other works do, telling a similar kind of story. There's some interesting sweeping long takes, but I found the framing and the camera work quite sort of straightforward. So this film didn't blow me away as many of other Scorsese's films did. And you made an interesting point this week that I've been thinking about, that it is too long. But when it comes to, well, what would you cut out? It's a very difficult thing to answer, because he does make a point with everything he includes. I think there's an argument to, should the focus have been a bit more narrow, maybe focusing on not such a wide gamut of things, or maybe moving through it a bit faster. But I wouldn't be the person who could tell you how and what. But and I thought the performances were fine. Lily Gladstone is so much better than everyone. She is coming from a place of such extreme truth in her eyes, in her reactions. She is so incredible in this film. It's worth watching for her performance alone. And I've never seen her in anything, and now I want to see her in more things, because she's fantastic. And DiCaprio's DiCaprio and De Niro's De Niro, and they know what they're doing, but they are capital A acting. DiCaprio in particular makes some particular physical choices that I kind of wish he hadn't, but I don't know. It's fine. I like Scorsese a lot as a director. There's an interesting coda at the end, and the way he sort of wraps up the story is kind of interesting, and also kind of feels like Scorsese might be trying to get in everything he's trying to say while he still can, if you know what I mean.
So I think that would be where. So Scorsese is, how old is he? Now that I've started the sentence, I should know the answer.
He's 80 something, I think.
81. And it does. He's made a lot of films that are interrogation of America's history with a lens of American sin, and this is definitely one of those as well. And it does maybe feel like if this turned out to be his last picture, I think he's really trying to get in like everything he can possibly say about the subject. You know what I mean? Like about
totally. Yeah.
About how the experience of the Osage Nation in this film is really the foundational American experience of being a minority, being oppressed by a white. Well, actually, to be fair, perfectly fair, a large indigenous group being oppressed by a white minority, and about the insidiousness of American capitalism and how directly tied to the exploitation of others it is. And I very much appreciate all of that about it. It's one of those ones that's going to be hard to talk about because it's going to sound like I'm quite down on it, but I did like the movie. Like, very generally, I liked the movie. I think I'm just going to echo right away. Lily Gladstone is amazing, and I hope that she gets all of the awards love in the new year. I think it'd be well deserved. There's one scene in particular where she's informed of a death and lets out a wail that kind of shook me to my core. Because it was so, I think you said extreme truth is I think the most apt way to have said it. I think Scorsese and De Niro are both, again, Scorsese and De Niro, they're both good. I
DiCaprio.
think, sorry, yeah, De Niro and DiCaprio are both good. I think that they are a little uneven in that there's some scenes in which they are incredible, and there are some scenes in which they are just good. So when I'm saying that they waver, or that they're inconsistent,
Mm,
it's not that they ever venture into bad. It's just that there's some scenes where they're incredible, and there's some scenes when they
mm,
are existing in film at their base level, which is good.
yeah, yeah, that's fair.
Um, but man, this movie's so long. It's three and a half
It is.
hours long, and I again, I do not know what you would cut out of this film, because anything you cut out would lessen the impact of the ending.
Mm.
Um, and it is
Would
hard to watch a film this long that is basically saying these are the bad guys, these are the bad
yeah.
guys, right? And to not hold back. My wife made an interesting point. She's not historically a huge Scorsese fan, and this is no exception. She didn't really jive
Mm-hmm.
with it at all. But she felt that
Mm,
if anything, DiCaprio's character was made too sympathetic, because
mm,
apparently in real life he was much worse.
mm,
Um, I felt that within the context of the film, it really focuses on him being a coward, of being a character who's
mm,
conflicted but ultimately unable to defy any kind of authority figure in his life,
mm,
which makes him a bit tragic, and thus maybe she's right, maybe a little too sympathetic. But even at the end, when he's given a chance to redeem himself, he doesn't take it
mm,
because he's a coward. And I thought that the scenes around that were kind of incredible. Um, and I thought, honestly, weirdly, if anyone, like, Robert De Niro is a great actor, one of the great film actors, period. And I cannot
mm,
think of a scene in which, I think there's only maybe one scene I can remember. I watched this movie like 4 days ago. There's maybe
mm,
one scene I can remember where I thought he was truly, truly excellent. Which again is not to say that he was bad at any of them, just that he doesn't have any standout moments, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's what you want. Maybe you just want three great scenes and no bad ones. But this movie's just a lot. It's just a lot,
Not
and I
not
feel
in
like
3.5 hours. Yeah.
and I feel like I've been thinking about this a lot, knowing we're going to be talking about it. So Scorsese has sort of two modes as a filmmaker. I mean, it's not quite that black and white, that binary, but he sort of has two modes as a filmmaker. One is that he makes films like, say, Goodfellas or The Departed or The Wolf of Wall Street that have this propulsive narrative that keeps you hooked and shows you things that are great but are actually ultimately terrible.
Mm,
Like, I rewatched Goodfellas this year, not that long ago, and I know there's a lot of dude bros who love that film, and I love that film. But I know there's a
mm,
lot of dude bros who love that film and really empathize with Henry Hill. But coming away from that film as a full-fledged adult, I can't help but think, how could anyone watch that show and think that Henry Hill's life is anything other than tragic and sad and paranoid and terrible,
mm,
you know?
mm,
And I feel
yeah.
like, so he has that kind of film, and I think The Wolf of Wall Street is one of the more recent super divisive ones where I personally think that anyone who thinks that film venerates Jordan Belfort just didn't watch the last hour.
Mm,
That's a 3 hour movie, and the last hour is effectively indicting you for enjoying the first 2 hours,
mm,
basically. But then he also makes films like Kundun and Silence,
yeah.
and where they're super slow, they're very meditative, and um, they're basically interrogating. Those two in particular are interrogating faith, and I feel like this film. This is a very long roundabout way to say this, but I feel like this film is the the former kind of film, but made with the tone and intent of the latter kind, and
Mm-hmm,
it doesn't quite jive for me,
mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
I completely agree with what you're saying. It doesn't have the bite of Goodfellas or Wolf of Wall Street,
It's not even
certainly in
the.
the
It's just
script.
a, like it feels like
For
a film.
me,
It
it
feels like a film that
absolutely
needs
is.
a bit something a bit more propulsive going on. It's a little maybe too slow
Yeah,
for the material, and I
yeah,
think that
absolutely.
I think personally, I know a lot of people don't agree, but I think that Silence is a masterpiece. Um, Silence is an incredible film. It's a huge downer. Um, it's a 3 hour downer. It's not an easy watch, but it is a masterwork.
Mm.
I think it should go down as one of Scorsese's best pictures. Um, but it is a long, slow interrogation of the nature of faith and the nature of man and faith, about religion, and the last scene of that movie is utterly devastating and just wouldn't be without the 3 hours that comes before it. This
Mm.
film feels like it's shooting for that, and I will say that the ending is very affecting, but it's not. I don't think it's as. I didn't find it to be as devastating as I think it was intended to be.
Yeah, no, totally. Totally.
So
I wonder if it would have been better suited as a 3 episode limited series, as there are 3 definite parts to this film.
yeah, I mean, I've heard that argument before, and I don't know the answer. I don't really think so, though. I think that at least the intent was that viewing it as this all at once, it's a complete story. Um, but like this movie's an Apple TV original, it's going to be an Apple TV Plus at some point.
Mm,
And whilst I will say that I think so. I watched this at home. I think maybe if I'd seen it in a cinema, I would like it more. Which is also true of The Irishman. I like The Irishman more
mhm,
than most people I know, and the key difference seems to have been that I watched it in a cinema. Um,
mm,
and I wonder if that would have been the case with this one as well.
mm,
Um, where I'm a little more, for lack of a better way to say it, where I was a little more captive to the experience.
mhm,
Um, it's difficult to watch a single thing this long at home without getting at least a little distracted or a little taken out of it. I think if I had been, and this is just me admitting that I was at home, so like I have cats and phones go off and it's easy to stop and go to the bathroom. That's all great. But I feel like a film like this kind of needs you to be captive to it, to be like immersed, forcibly immersed into it.
mm.
And I think that that might have heightened my opinion of it had it been the case. Because again, certainly did with The Irishman. Like, The Irishman is not a perfect film, definitely has
No, but
problems, but sitting down in a dark room and being like immersed into it made it a much better experience than everyone I know who watched it at home. So
the Irishman
that
has a much stronger script as well, and I think that's the key thing that would drive my interest for 3.5 hours is a dynamic script that pushes things forward, that has a bit more interesting interplay. And I just, compared to his other stuff that he didn't write many of the other films I'm comparing to, but he has directed better scripts that have far more propulsion. And I think this really needed a dose of that to get through it.
I mean, he has written a lot of the films he's directed, though. Like a lot of the ones we consider to be classics, he's at least co-writing credit on. Um, so I don't know. I just feel like I wanted to love this movie so much, so that the fact that I just like it is kind of a letdown. You know, it's not fair, um, and it's certainly um, making this sound a lot more down than I actually am. But the core piece here to take away is that I liked this movie. I just didn't love it. Um,
Mm.
and if I was going to do a Scorsese ranking, it would probably be near the bottom. But that would be with the caveat that I've never. I looked it up. I've never given a Scorsese film less than 3 out of 5. So
Mm-hmm.
do with all that information whatever you're
I
going to do
yield.
with it. But I think it's a perfectly fine movie, and I think it's definitely worth watching. I think at some point someone's going to publish a think piece that's like, here's how you watch this movie in 4 parts, and you can do that. It'll be fine.
Mhm.
And I hope that people watch it. I hate how down I sound about it because I do think it's a good, well constructed, very well acted, especially by Lily Gladstone movie, and um, I think it's good. I think it's an important story about American history that not a lot of people know about. Similar to how we all
Mhm.
found out about the Tulsa race massacre when Watchmen happened, right? Like, which is
Mhm.
directly referenced in this movie. I think it's an important film, and I I I recommend everyone watch it for themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
My dumbass at the beginning, I wondered if I'd missed something, that this was an alternate history because of how wealthy the Osage were at the beginning. I had no idea. I had no idea how established they were, because you just get fed the Cowboys and Indians version of Native peoples of America, and
What's a That's an
to see
interesting one
them.
too, just because like the U.S. government forced the Osage people to move, right? Like they were in one wherever their traditional lands are, they were forced to move. I think twice, and then they landed in Oklahoma on this reservation, and then it just turned out they had all the oil under the reservation, and they became rich, and the government basically went, "Well, shit," like it's. I do feel like maybe based on the way you're speaking about it, like, and I'm not claiming to have like deep historical knowledge, but I feel like there is some context that maybe could have been provided in a little more depth to that aspect
Yeah.
of it. I think if anything, like there's a scene right near the beginning that's pretty emblematic, at least of the first half, and there's a Osage person standing and a woman standing beside him, and then a younger Osage man in a car, and there's a white man
Mm,
begging them,
mm,
please help me out. My my wife is sick. My baby's going to die of starvation. Like, you got to help me out. You have the money. I don't. And
mm,
after like it goes on for a solid minute
mm.
before it turns out he's actually just trying to sell them a car.
Yeah.
And when they agree to buy the car, he's like, "Oh, thank you." And if you get a flat tire, just come back and buy another one. And it's such an interesting. A lot of this movie is fairly on the nose like that. Like there's
Mm.
another early scene you've probably seen referenced in other reviews where Leonardo DiCaprio is reading a book and he literally says, "Can you spot the wolves in this picture?" Just as he leaves to go literally like rob some Osage people, like to
Yeah.
mug them in the street. And I feel like that is a thing. I think a lesser filmmaker, this would be a straight up bad movie because it's so on the nose.
Mm.
Because that's a difficult thing to pull off, and I think he generally does. But I think if this was almost any other filmmaker, it would just be too much. So
He does feel angry in this film. This feels like a director who is pissed, and that is a very clear at the beginning. I did laugh at that line because it doesn't leave any ambiguity about what he's saying about what's coming up in this film, and also the coda at the end, without expanding on it, is a very personal Scorsese connection to the story being told. So that's why
yeah,
it does feel a bit like, what if this is my last movie? It felt like a real like punctuation mark in so many ways. And
I
I
mean,
hope it isn't, because I do like watching his films.
I wonder almost if like just in our talking, I've started to wonder if like in some ways it almost feels that the movie is so straightforward and so sort of directly on point that maybe it's almost like parts of some of the choices in this film are basically saying like, well, you fuckers didn't actually watch some of my previous films. Like, you didn't actually watch The Irishman, you didn't actually watch The Wolf of Wall Street, you didn't actually watch
Mm.
uh Goodfellas. Like, you didn't actually watch and take in what I was trying to tell you, so I'm just going to be a little
Mm.
more straightforward.
Yes,
um I
that
wonder
would make sense.
I wonder if that is the case, because that's certainly how it feels in
Hmm.
speaking about it today.
Yes. No,
So
I think that's a very I totally agree with that. How many
yeah,
stars are you giving Killers of the Flower Moon then?
oh, three. I mean, it's still good. It's still a
Mm.
good movie. It's not
Hmm.
going to work for everyone. just because it is so long. Like, again, it is difficult. It's difficult to find 3.5 hours to watch something at home at the best of times, and it's
Yes.
difficult to remain with rapt attention. Like, this film sort of requires for three
Mm.
and a half hours at home.
Mm.
But it's a good film. Like, it's not going to make my top 10 of the year, unfortunately.
Mm.
But it's a good film, and it's an important film with an important message about the insidious nature of American capitalism and the way we rewrite history, and the way,
Mm-hmm.
uh, just the way that America works, generally speaking. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I hope. I have mixed feelings about the idea that Scorsese even made this picture. Like, I have seen it said that perhaps this should have been told by an indigenous filmmaker. And I have a hard time with this because I don't disagree with that, but I also think Scorsese having made it means that more of the eyeballs that need to see this film will
Mm.
see it.
Yeah, no,
Uh, so I don't have a good answer for that, but
mm-hmm.
I mean, I think telling the story and focusing on the white guy is a choice that at first blush might be problematic, but when you realize that, as with many of his other films, he's telling a story about the villain in the picture,
Mm-hmm.
it does make sense. Uh, but yeah, it's a good film. It's a good film, and you should definitely watch it. 3 stars out of 5. You?
Yeah, I'm 3 as well. I don't like it as much as you, but I'm still going to give it 3 stars. I think there's a range in 3 stars, particularly for I would say this whole movie is worth watching for Lily Gladstone's performance. If you want to see some actual, real, like authentic truth in a character, and I'm sure she's from that culture. She is well aware of the trauma that she carries with her, and I think she dips into that, but not in a way that feels um, performative, if that's the right word.
Mm-hmm.
She's just absolutely her eyes, man. Just she's just absolutely authentic in the whole thing, and that scream as well. And she's such a central part of the story. In a way that Leo didn't really work for me. She works as much the other way. So 3 stars mainly for her, really.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. I mean, I think the way I would describe DiCaprio's performance is that, again, like, I think he's great in almost every individual scene, but that those scenes strung together don't necessarily form a cohesive character in a way that
Mm-hmm.
I think was maybe intended.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult because his character is one of such divided loyalty and duality. He's trying to be one thing, but he's clearly another.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ultimately, he's one thing. He's a coward, but he's trying to be a loving husband and also the right hand man of a crime boss who's trying to exploit his wife. And it's a difficult line to walk, and I'm not sure he's entirely successful in it. But also, he's in. I think there's a scene towards the end of this film, which is just him and Lily Gladstone sitting across from one another in a room,
That's a
and
good
it's
scene.
it's one of the best acted scenes of the year. So, um, it's just, again, it's just uneven, right? It's uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but
Okay.
anyway, so that's 3 stars each for Killers of the Flower Moon. It is available to rent now. Um, as always, if you go to the homepage for this episode, you will find JustWatch-Powered streaming links, and if you click those to find a way to stream it, then that helps us keep the lights on. So please do that. But we're going to move on now to another film, which is about as far away from Killers of the Flower Moon as you can get, and that is Toho's new Godzilla Minus One, which is the latest entry in the ongoing Godzilla franchise. Uh,
Yes.
it is the 33rd, I think, 33rd or
I have no idea.
33rd or 34th film in the ongoing um, Godzilla Japanese version of the Godzilla franchise. and like the 40th or something overall, thanks to the American ones now. And I almost don't want to talk about it because the short version of this review is going to be that it is fucking great. Go and see this movie on the largest screen you can find. It follows the story of a young kamikaze pilot who, in the opening scene of the movie, he lands at a repair base. His name is Koichi Shikishima, and he lands claiming his plane is defective. That is, and he lands and has the mechanics look it over, and they take him aside and they're like, "There is nothing wrong with your plane, dude." And that same night, Godzilla attacks the island that he's on, Odo Island, and kills everyone except for him and one mechanic. In 46, he makes his way back to now post-war, post-bombing Tokyo, ruined by survivor's guilt. But he nevertheless manages to meet a homeless sort of street thief who has a baby that she's been basically given, and they form a small family unit. And then he gets a job clearing mines on a small wooden boat. And then the nuclear tests at Operation Crossroads mutate Godzilla from a big dinosaur-looking thing into the huge monster we now recognize as Godzilla. And Godzilla starts attacking Japan. And he is in the thick of it. And this is I almost don't want to say anything about this film because it is so good, but this is a film that is about survivor's guilt. It is about finding family. It is about whether you can go home again. It is about how we deal with the forces of nature in our lives, things we can't control and what we can. It is, with the caveat that it is a different kind of performance, I think it is exceedingly well performed by basically everyone involved. And despite the fact that I think at the end there's a couple of moments that if you're paying attention to the film, you'll be like, yeah, of course, like this, I saw this coming from a mile away, but they are all so well executed that it doesn't matter. I think that the choice to make this effectively a remake of the 1954 Godzilla film, but it's set in 1945 through 48. And it's probably the most successful Godzilla film in terms of its sort of narrative purpose since the original. Which is saying a lot because it's 30 plus movies in. And I loved it. I loved every second of it. And that's not even getting to the point where the total budget for the film was something like $15 million. And it looks, I mean, there's some caveats to this, but it looks basically comparable to anything made in the West today. I don't know, man. It's a great movie. It's a great movie. I almost don't want to talk about, because I don't want to spoil any particular part of it. But it is a great movie, and I don't know. I believe, based on the fact that we text every day, that you agree with me, Simon.
I'm just sat here waiting for you to draw breath because I just want to talk about this movie like for an hour. I want to talk about every part of this movie. Just an incredible film, and I find it really. We come from very different backgrounds when it comes to Godzilla, and my only exposure to Godzilla really before the last couple of years was the animated Godzilla and Godzuki, the Toho show from the 80s. Godzilla, which I watched a lot with terrible Godzuki, Godzuki was the Scrappy-Doo of the Godzilla universe, similarly annoying. And then I watched, I was aware of Godzilla as monster movies, and so whenever I saw a monster movie, I knew it was referencing it, but I'd never seen the originals. And then I saw the Matthew Broderick. What year was that? The American
90,
Godzilla.
98, 97, 98, something like that.
And that's not a good film. And then I've not really enjoyed the modern American ones, the MonsterVerse ones. I know you like them quite a lot. I don't like them. I don't find the human drama well written, well acted. I don't find the monsters interesting enough to carry a film. So I'm not the Godzilla fan you are. And so what's really fascinating to me, starting with watching the original with my son about a month ago, is realizing what these movies were really about. And that first movie, made 11 years after the end of the Second World War, with still real rebuilding Hiroshima and Nagasaki and all the people dealing with that, and watching this film and be like, oh my God, this film is about trauma. Godzilla's about the trauma. It's the metaphor of the horrors of nuclear warfare. And then this film is like, it takes the original and just, I was not expecting a giant monster movie to be a deeply emotional and intelligent exploration of national PTSD after the end of the war, national guilt, and the will to live and the need to die for honor, and what happens when you don't do that, and then looking after each other, what it means to be a family. What is a family? Like,
Mm-hmm.
at what point do you become a family when it's not your family to begin with? And then and it just builds and builds and builds, and then at the, so to underline the points, not aside from it, but to underline all these points, you've got the Godzilla attacks that really amplify everything. All the story beats that have been written into the characters are amplified by the monster attack. It's so intelligently done. The fact this was written, directed, and VFX by one guy is mind-blowing to me, because it is so well written, it's so well directed, and the VFX, I would argue, look better than any American thing I've seen, any big American budget thing. And this is a big franchise thing. Like, Godzilla is one of the big Japanese international franchises. It is comparable to other American franchises in terms of status. And the fact that Toho took this one guy who's done a bunch of films before, but said, okay, you do everything here for 15 million, and for him to make a film that is this affecting and this clever, like,
Mm-hmm.
with sound. My son came out of this talking about the sound of this movie, about how silence is used as a punctuation mark. I couldn't be happier, because I'm just like, yeah, you're absolutely right. This film knows when to be loud, but it also knows when to be quiet, and it knows when to be silent. And it is incredible. The flow of this movie is, it's very, very slow in places. It takes its time with the characters, beautifully acted by Kamiki Renosuke and Minami Hamabe. I almost got that. And there's so much truth in their performances as well. And that last 10 minutes is one of the most emotional endings of a movie I've seen in years, and it's so well done. It's so
Mm-hmm.
truthfully acted. It's so brilliantly introducing. Yeah, the thing that happens, you do see it. And my son said, I was a little bit disappointed. I could see that. I picked up on that, and I said, yeah, but that's fine. Okay, it's the filmmaker is giving that to you as a clue, so it kind of feels satisfying later. So it is telegraphed, but
Yeah,
there were, like,
it's not like it's a
the,
twist. It's a reveal.
no. So yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the fact at the end of this movie, there was a girl behind me, openly, like, uncontrollably sobbing in a Godzilla movie, and you're so used to American movies where the giant monster movies like Pacific Rim or any other big monster movies are generally CGI heavy, ragtag groups who get together and then kill the monster, and it's a big CGI battle, and you feel nothing by the end of it. But oh yeah, that was cool. This is one of, like, a deeply emotional drama that happens to have Godzilla in it, and it does it brilliantly. Like, it combines those disparate parts brilliantly, and I'm just blown away by it. And the really interesting thing as well is that I, in the same week, I watched Shin Godzilla from 2016, and I've learned from discussions with you and from research that Toho is basically like, yeah, we're gonna try some different things and see what works with this franchise. So Shin Godzilla is a completely different movie, but it's fantastic. But it's modern set. It looks like it's filmed on handycams. It's a bunch of, like, nerdy scientists versus Godzilla. Completely different movie, and yet recognizably Godzilla. And this film, completely different era and style of movie, yet recognizably Godzilla. Both incredible films, but this is just mind blowing. This film just blew me away. So yeah,
I
I
mean, that's
quite liked it.
sort of the great strength of Godzilla is that the best Godzilla films are not really about Godzilla, right? Like this
Mm,
one is about very specifically and overtly about wartime PTSD. The original is very nakedly about how do we deal with the fact that we were basically treated to an apocalyptic event with the dropping of the like Godzilla's a stand-in for the bomb in the first
mm,
one. You know, the for better or for worse, the 2014 American Godzilla, which I think is one of the better ones, is just about how you deal with these world-ending events happening around you. Like it's not about Godzilla; it's about the family unit, and it's debatably successful. But again, it's the theme that it is not about Godzilla holds true. And this is again, I'm just going to again say that like this is one of the most successful ones since the original.
mm,
Um, I said a bunch of times before that the best Godzilla films are like basically drenched in metaphor, or they have giant monsters
mm.
beating the ever living fuck out of one another. And this is a, maybe the best example of the first kind. Um,
Right. Yeah.
I think it's amazing to me how successful it is with its effects as well. Because again, like it's only $15 million, and there's lots of things you could point out, like the fact that Godzilla's eyes don't really move, and like in the new American ones, you can see like every scale on his body, and there's like a level of detail there that is legitimately incredible. And this doesn't necessarily have that, but also it doesn't really matter. Like
No, doesn't matter at
it's
all.
the it's the it's the most it's a little more basic. Like he moves a lot slower. He moves interestingly, like it's obviously CG, but he also moves like a dude in a
Yes.
suit, which I very much
Exactly.
appreciate.
Yeah.
Um, and it like Godzilla's head looks like a giant mask, even though it's CG, and
Hmm.
I kind of loved that about it. Because ultimately, again, this movie's not about Godzilla, so Godzilla himself doesn't really matter. Um, so like when I tell you that they recreated the 19 the local fighter Shinden, which is a real plane that was really made and never made it past prototype, and see that thing fly is pretty incredible.
Oh,
Like
it's so good.
it looks amazing. And even though, like I say, the ending, there's bits of the ending where you're going to see them coming a mile away. It's not a twist, like it is just a reveal, and it's maybe a little ham-handed. But like you're talking about someone else in your theater crying. I was crying in my theater, Simon. Like I was
Yeah.
crying. This is a deeply emotional film that talks a lot about things I think most of us can relate to. Um,
Mm.
and it's I'm really glad that it's making just all the money off its
Yeah,
budget. I
it's
think
doing
it's
really well.
I mean, it's at like, I mean, it's only made like $45 million or something like that so far. But when you consider that's three times its budget and it's only gaining momentum, like it only just opened here.
Mm.
Um, I just honestly like, if you're listening to this, look up when this movie is playing and go watch it. It is great. It is legitimately great. Um, and whether you're looking for kaiju action or for a deep emotional drama, you're going to get both.
Mm. Yep.
And I, yeah,
See, my
I'm having a hard time talking about it because there's things I want to say that I would consider spoilers. But
yeah.
when you consider the performances of Ryanosuke Kamiki and Minami Hamabe, who are
Mm.
sort of like the core family that forms, but also the interplay between um, Kamiki and Munetaka Aoki, who plays the lone
Mm.
surviving mechanic who knows what Koichi
Mm.
did at the beginning of the film. He's not even
Mm.
in the film that much.
Mm.
But his scenes are so good. He's so good at the beginning and he's so good at the end for entirely different reasons, performance reasons that I don't want to spoil. um,
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. Sakura Ando as well, who plays a woman called Sumiko, is another Tokyo survivor who's like almost a neighbor to Kimiki's character. She has one of my favorite moments in the whole movie, just from their interplay and their relationship is so interestingly established as it goes through the time as it passes. and there's one little moment where she sort of physically pushes him. I don't want to say more than that, but it's just really real. It's just really
Hmm.
astute, and it's just lovely, and it introduces a piece of information that it just fits together beautifully. It's just so well done.
Yep. And
Yeah.
we haven't even talked
It's,
about like the other guys on his mine clearing boat crew who are
mm-hmm,
uniformly
mm-hmm,
great. Although
mm-hmm,
I would say I would really like to single out Hidetaka Yoshioka, who plays
mm-hmm.
this older character who's like, "Oh, I worked in the war effort. I was in strategic planning or whatever." And then it turns out he's on this mining boat, but he was actually like very high up in the war effort
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like strategy and planning. And this is
Yeah.
also a film that like there's going to be some asshole dubro in your life that says that like Godzilla movies are not political. But this is a movie that literally has a
Oh my
character
god.
all but turn to this camera and say the
Yeah.
Japanese government is inefficient and does
Yes.
not care about you, and therefore we must solve this problem by ourselves. Like
Yes.
it's like this
Shin
movie,
Godzilla does the same thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
this movie like is very overtly political in a way that I find. I guess here's the thing: if this was an American film, I think we would call it ham-handed, right? Like it
Mm-hmm.
is not shy. It doesn't shy away from anything. It doesn't shy away from
Mm-hmm.
overtly telling you what it's trying to tell you. And it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting to me that that is works so well in not just in this franchise, but in Japanese film very specifically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Most of the Japanese films that I've seen that I've loved have a scene where a character basically turns to the camera and says, "And this is what we're trying to teach you with this artistic experience."
Yeah.
And if you did that in an American film, you'd be like, "Oh God!" Like what? But
Mm-hmm.
it just works. It works so
Yeah.
well in this film, um, and I kind of can't wait to see how some people I'm aware of react to it when they see it. Um, but it's wonderful. I can't wait for this movie to be available at home so I can watch it a bazillion times. I wish
Now,
I wish that I
uh,
had time to go and see it in a cinema again.
to answer your question in our bonus round this week, that is a steelbook I would buy in a heartbeat if they release like a fancy version of this film in 4K.
So I
Well,
would
they probably
actually
will.
I would. I know I'm worried about that because I agree, but they've only ever released a fairly standard edition of Shin Godzilla Blu-ray. It's never had a steelbook or a collector's edition. There's only been one, and it took a year for it to come out here.
Right.
So I don't.
But this has been doing so well. I've been seeing this in non-movie press that even my parents are talking about it. Like this is getting some serious coverage because it is doing so well. So
I
hopefully
mean,
that
I
propels it
hope
a
that they
bit.
do. I hope that they do. I'm just choosing to not hold my breath this time.
Hmm.
But if anyone from Toho is listening, like, give me that, give me that super expensive collector's edition, man. Like, it'll be on my shelf for sure, right
Yes.
beside. And if you're listening, just for the record, like, license the Heisei and Millennium Eras to Criterion, so I can get second and third, like those editions, right beside my Showa era box set as well. Just as a side note.
Mm,
And matching same style. Would love to have those like book sets side by side on my shelf if you're
mm.
listening, Criterion and Toho.
I'm
um
sure they are. Get right on that.
because my Showa era box set is incredible. It's like more of a
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
it's a book, right?
Yeah.
But it's incredible and I want more like that. So
Hmm.
do the thing, please do the thing.
Yes, please
So
do.
how many stars are you giving Godzilla subtraction Uno, sir?
5 + 5 -1 plus 6 equals 5 stars. Like
So
moving, visually stunning, exciting, everything I want modern filmmaking to be. And I would love the big franchise owners in America to look at what's been done here and to learn some damn lessons. How many stars for you?
when I first came out of this film, I gave it 4, and I think the more I've thought about it, the more I think I was wrong, and it's worth 5.
Hmm.
Um, I can't wait to see this film again.
Hmm.
And I would say this is also and one thing that I really appreciate about this film, and this is also true of Shin Godzilla compared to the American ones, but they really get the roar right in a way that the American ones
Yes.
don't necessarily get it wrong, but there's something about the quality of the Godzilla's roar in Japanese film versus American ones that is. I think they're trying to make him like emote or speak more or say more with his roar, and this one really
Mm-hmm.
gets the base level, like guttural, visceral, like you should be afraidness of the roar better. Uh,
Yep.
it's a total side note, but Godzilla's roar is important to me, so I'm making it.
Another side note: if you're interested in watching this and have Apple TV, then please do watch the Monarch TV show because it does have, including this film, the single best shot of Godzilla ever, in my opinion, which is when someone's trying to evacuate kids off a school bus, and in the deep background, Godzilla's face comes round and roars into the foreground. Is probably my favorite Godzilla shot ever, and it's a great show.
Yeah, and I can tell you that show is running through the beginning of January, but I can tell you I've now seen all of it, and it is
Mm-hmm.
great. I
Yes.
think I'm technically breaking an embargo by saying that, but it's great, and you should watch.
Well,
You should watch
see
it.
us. Yes, you should.
Um,
So yeah, 5 stars. Go see it. Please go
yeah,
see it in the cinema. Please, please go see it on the biggest, darkest screen, the biggest screen, the darkest room, the biggest sound system. I saw it in regular because I had to go with my son. So the only time I could see it was in like regular screening instead of AVX. And I'm seriously thinking of catching it in AVX, or is it on IMAX anywhere?
I don't
I
actually know if it's an
should
IMAX,
probably
but
do
I
that.
definitely saw it in an AVX screen.
Hmm.
And yeah, like just find the biggest screen you can see it on and watch it there
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it is legitimately great.
yeah.
And again, when it's available at home, I look forward to watching it roughly a million times in the same way that
Absolutely.
I have seen original Godzilla a million times in my life.
Yes,
There's a
fantastic.
podcast in here somewhere where we just watch Godzilla films, but there's a podcast there
Oh,
in
okay.
a lot of places. So
That would be perfect because I haven't seen any of it apart from the original now. So I would love to work through one by one and see them decide to become more like King of the Monsters, Protector of the Earth era Godzilla, which I didn't realize he was treated as an unstoppable force of nature. I thought he was just a nice friend to the people. So
well,
that
again,
was a
that's the
wake up
other
call
thing
as well.
that makes a great Godzilla film, and I think that the American ones, like the Legendary Monsterverse, is moderately successful at this, but the best versions of a Godzilla film have Godzilla as he's just an unstoppable force.
Hmm.
He's not necessarily malevolent and he's not
Hmm.
necessarily a friend. He's just a thing that exists
Yeah,
that everyone has to deal with.
like a
And
storm.
he's a stand-in for, again, like in the best ones, which would be 54 and minus one, he's a stand-in for this national PTSD that Japan has suffered.
Hmm.
And again, I think 2014 does a pretty good job of him being that. Um, and I think that the later ones where they've made him like, and the American ones, the later ones where they've made him like an alpha monster, and he's not fighting to protect people. He's just fighting to maintain his alpha status. I think is an interesting
Hmm.
but overthought twist on that. Even though I
Hmm.
like most of those movies,
Hmm.
even if
Yeah.
Godzilla versus Kong is not great.
Hmm. Yeah.
um, but yeah, this is a great film, and you should definitely see it. So I'm going to go ahead and say that's two films we've watched this week. One that we loved and one that we liked mostly.
Hmm.
You should definitely see both of
That's
them
fine.
for different
That's fine.
reasons. And we're going to end it there because we are over time.
Yes.
So thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to support us, we do have check out the homepage. You'll find streaming links for both of these movies. And if you use those streaming links, they update as availability changes. And if you use them to find a place to stream, rent, or buy them digitally, that helps us keep the lights on. You can also support us on your podcasting platform of choice. We're on basically all of them. But if you can give us a good review or subscribe, those things help immeasurably. And last but not least, we do have a Patreon. And if you are a supporter on there for as little as $2 a month Canadian, you do get a bonus episode every week. This week we talked about
Hmm.
sort of white whale home video purchases, and our, our Star Wars pitches, which was a very interesting conversation that I'm glad Simon brought up. Last but certainly not least, we record this here in Vancouver, BC, Canada. We are on the unceded and ancestral territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. And one last time, thank you so much for listening and for joining us on this awesome Friday.
Bye.